Startup Canada and TruShield Insurance. Startup School is a program of Startup Canada Live, a monthly webinar series dedicated to the professional development of Canada's entrepreneurs and community leaders. My name is Matthew Allen. I'm a journalist and a volunteer with Startup Canada, and I'm your host for today. I will introduce our featured guest in a few moments. Today's Startup School topic is about managing risk and protecting your assets. It's presented by TruShield Insurance, the place for small business and startups to get the insurance they need. We have an amazing guest joining us today. I want to welcome Mike Gaba, Business Development Manager for TruShield Insurance and an expert in property and casualty insurance. We're going to jump right into today's Q&A, but a reminder to our audience that you can ask questions throughout the hour using the YouTube comment section and by using the Startup School hashtag on Twitter. So without further ado, welcome to the program, Mike.
Hey, I appreciate that, Matthew. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks so much for joining us today. Please take a couple of minutes to introduce yourself.
Okay, so well, you did a great job already, but yeah, my name is Mike Gaba. I am the Business Development Manager at TruShield Insurance for Western Canada. A part of what I do is education in terms of how to manage risk, how to assess your company's exposures with regards to insurance, and then at times I organize that with an insurance policy, but a lot of times that stuff's handled by our reps that do the sales aspect of it. But in short, that's what I do.
That's awesome. Thanks again for being with us. Why don't we begin with some general questions? So what does risk management mean to you?
So risk management to me would be, there's a couple parts to that. The first part would be just being aware of your risks that you may have. Let's just say you have a business and you're selling water bottles, for example, or you're selling, well, anything really. I guess it would be just looking at how could your water bottles or your item, cause damage to other people, or if somebody used that product incorrectly, what would it do? So I think that's probably the first part of it, is just being aware of where your exposures lie with your product and perhaps your advice if something went sideways. And then the second part of that would be talking to a professional in order to make sure that those risks are, I guess, uncovered and secondly, covered properly by an insurance policy, if it makes sense too. And there's always premium associated with that, aware of it, and then making the decision yourself whether you'd like to insure that portion of your risk or not insure that portion of your risk. So I think just being in the driver's seat and then having a full awareness of what's actually going on in the business in terms of risk.
And when starting your company, how much do you think you can control over what you can't realistically control?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I think you can realistically control. I was gonna say you can probably control most of your business, but there's a lot that's out of your control. But you can control, maybe the quality aspect of your product. You can control how well it follow-ups, maybe the operational aspect of things. But things that might fall out of your control would be natural disasters, obviously, and products going wrong or shipments going wrong. As an entrepreneur, you face a lot of different things going right and wrong in terms of insurance and what could go wrong. There is, a lot of it is in your control, right? If you do, here's one tip. So if you have a product, having batch numbers. So if a product goes wrong or something happens, you can ask them for an identifying number, and then you can kind of pinpoint when that product was made or perhaps where it was manufactured if you're using different manufacturers. So there are ways to control that risk, but I would say probably a good portion of it is in your control.
So what risks does your startup face that you may not have known about before getting into the business?
Yeah. So nowadays, everybody's pretty familiar with cyber liability and cyber risks. So one big risk would be if you're taking people's if you're taking people's information down, and their credit card or payment details or address, shipment information, all that type of information. If you're gathering that info, that's a pretty big risk if there was a data breach. So if somebody was able to penetrate your computer and take all of that data from you, that's a significant exposure that I don't know a lot of companies are aware of, because a lot of times what happens is when you're starting up a company and you want to secure lending, or you need to get insurance because the landlord is asking you to, because he wants insurance to know that his building's going to be covered if you burn it down. A lot of times that includes a general liability policy and a little bit of property coverage, but it's sufficing what the bank needs or the landlord needs. It might not be sufficing what you need. So again, taking a really good look at yourself. Are you still there? Kind of breaking up a little bit. Sorry. Yeah.
Sorry about that. The connection got a little bit bad. Could you just repeat that last bit?
Yeah. So I guess the long-winded or the short-winded answer would be going back to the kind of the first question of really looking at what your overall exposure is, and then taking that to a professional in the industry, and then being able to address all those concerns. But yeah, cyber liability would be probably one of the major ones.
Right, and you mentioned, I'm sorry, you mentioned a solution before to managing some of those risks. What are some of the other steps that you could take to manage risks for your business? Because I know, like with cybersecurity, that's one thing where if you have one breach, your reputation really takes a hit there, right? So, like, what are some of the things that you can do to manage those risks? Not just cybersecurity, but just in general as well.
Yeah. That's actually a really good point in terms of like reputation. If you were to get sued and you didn't have the right coverage, and ultimately couldn't really solve the problem because the insurance wasn't in place, or you just kind of go under, I think there's a myth out there. Not everybody subscribes to it, but if I get sued, I can basically just shut down my business and everything will be okay, and then I'll just maybe start up a new business. But in terms of reputation, that might follow you beyond the closure of one legal entity into the opening up a new one. But some steps you could take to manage some of that risk. Well, if you want to just talk about pure exposures, I mean, you have the property side of things. So you've got computers and laptops and all that, and it would basically be just talking to the insurance company about what you physically have. So let's just say you're a photographer and you've got some cameras. Asking them, okay, so if I'm at my office, are these covered? Give me an example of when they wouldn't be covered. And if I'm off site, if I'm taking pictures somewhere and I've got my laptop with me or whatever, and I got $10,000 worth of gear with me, is it covered here? Maybe give me an example of when it wouldn't be covered, and then running through things that way. And then you've got your liability side of things. So if you were taking pictures, or you have a ladder with you for whatever reason, or props, and something falls, would you be covered on that aspect of it? So I guess just running through the scenarios. And I think it's a lot of times it's easier to maybe leave your head in the sand a little bit and really not ask those questions to yourself, because you don't really want to ever think about that happening. But the worst thing you could, the best case scenario is if you think about these and you protect yourself and nothing happens. And then the worst case scenario is if you kind of choose not to think about those things, and then it happens, and then you're not covered. So it's better to be covered and not need it than to not be covered and need it, is what I'm trying to say.
Right, right. So is coverage the only way of managing your risk? Are there other ways of doing it too?
Yeah, for sure. There's a lot of practical operational things that you can do. So it can be pretty simple. So one example would be if you start up a retail location and you have some steps outside your store. In the wintertime, keep them clean. Just keep the ice off of it. Keep them safe. Sorry, another one would be if you've got kind of runny steps, maybe paint one yellow. Like it's not really rocket science, but I mean, I guess it is things that maybe if you're not in the industry, you might not necessarily think of. But I know with retail, documentation is a big one. So, for example, the large chains, they have pretty strict documentation in terms of when each aisle was cleaned and that type of thing for cleanliness for slip and falls. So I guess just maybe adopting some of those. So if your startup is a retail location, maybe document, okay, floors were cleaned at 10:30. I don't know if it's practical for everybody, but
right.
But I mean, if you could document that, it's December 1st, salted the steps, really big snowfall, so I'm going to document dips and falls, and you can say, well, you know what, I salted about 25 minutes before you came, so I know it wouldn't have been icy. So, and again, I don't know if that's really practical for everybody, but I guess one thing you could do is reach out to your insurance company, because they're probably going to be a great resource, and then ask them for advice in terms of managing risk, and they should be available to tell you what you could do or give you tips in order to manage that risk. I mean, it's only in their best interest to help you manage the risk. So if you reach out, there should be some sort of should be some sort of response that they could give you in terms of managing that risk for you.
Yeah, and are insurance companies the best place to go to figure out what some of the risks might be in your particular business, or are there other places that you can go to get advice on those things?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say that the insurance company is a good place to start, frankly, just because they're the ones who are responsible for covering the risk at the end of the day. Oh, are you still there? It's kind of breaking up a little bit.
Yeah, I broke up a bit again, but it's okay.
Yeah, so I would say that's probably a great start. And you know what? I'm just trying to rack my brain a little bit in terms of where else could you go. You know what? The internet might be a decent resource as well in terms of how to manage risk, or if you were to type in so let's face it, consumers and business owners these days, they're the smartest that they've ever been. There's the most information out there on the internet. So you know what, like maybe before reaching out, maybe you do a little bit of your own research online, and you type in a similar type of business, maybe type in, manage risk in accounting, or manage risk in photography or graphic design, or whatever, or type in lawsuits, graphic design. Maybe get a sense for what's actually happening in the industry, or what can go wrong. That's probably a great start, actually. Yeah. Google. I Google everything. So anyway.
Yeah, Google's a great place.
Yeah.
And I wanted to touch on as well. You mentioned you can entrepreneurs can put policies in place. Yeah. But I think a lot of the times with risk, mitigating that is getting the employees to actually buy in to the concept that they're risky behavior. There are that you've got to follow the policies basically, and if you don't, these are certain things that can happen. Like, how important is that an important thing to do, and if so, how can you get employees to buy into policies that you might put in place to mitigate risk?
Oh, Matt. Oh, it cut out there for a second.
I can hear you.
Are you there?
Hello?
All right. Sorry, it kind of cut out there for a second.
That's okay.
Are you there?
Yep.
Okay, so we're back online, I think. So, do you mind repeating that question?
It's just about getting, so if you're an entrepreneur and you've got people working for you and you're trying to mitigate certain risks, how do you get employees to buy into those things? Because you can implement policy, but if employees aren't following through, then you're not getting the effect that I would imagine you're not getting the effects that you're hoping to get.
Yeah, no, that's actually a great question. So one area that this would definitely ring true would be if you're an entrepreneur starting out any type of construction company, whether you're a landscaper or you want to start a home building business, or you want to step out, maybe you want to renovate some homes, flip some homes for yourself. So in that industry, there are going to be like warranties and conditions and exclusions in the policies and they can vary significantly from policy to policy. So I guess to answer your question is, if there's a warranty so a warranty is really like if you do this, if you don't follow this guideline, there's either no coverage or the coverage is going to be modified in favor of the insurance company, and it's basically just like a safety measure. So, so an example would be, if you're building a home or you're doing any type of hot works like welding, you need to stick behind for about 30 minutes. It's called a hot works warranty. So if you don't know about that hot works warranty, or you know about it but you haven't communicated it to your employees, or employees don't follow it and they burn the house down, it could potentially void the whole insurance policy because you haven't followed some of these strict conditions. And the conditions aren't there to, aren't there to catch you, like an insurance company, like, oh, we got you, we're not going to pay your claim. I don't think that's the intention. I think the intention is really just to have a safe site. Another warranty would be having heaters inside, because some people put open flame heaters in houses to speed up drying time and that type of thing for drywall. And there's warranties around that too. So I would say A, being aware of those, because a lot of people aren't aware of what's in their policy, and then B, definitely communicating that to the employees and making sure, because if they're not following those procedures, it could potentially void the whole policy or change it dramatically, void a particular coverage, and then at the end of the day, you could be on the hook as the entrepreneur for paying for the house that your employee just burnt down. So it really is essential that you're aware of it, and then your employees are aware of them as well. Because you're right, if you could have the best policy in the world, but if you're not following those conditions, it's not going to help you.
Right. What is it? I wanted to shift over to advice. What is meant by protecting your advice, and why do professionals do this?
Yeah. So so if you were to let's just say you had a product, like you were a coffee roaster and you sell your product. There's not necessarily an advice aspect of it. Like if the beans do what they do, like they make coffee and they don't make anybody sick, you should be good to go, provided they taste good. But if you are just giving advice, like let's just say you're an interior designer and somebody hires you specifically because they believe that your advice and your thought process will be clear, you'll be able to address their concerns, and it's maybe it's a little bit more abstract than providing a tasty cup of coffee. You're almost translating in terms of an interior designer, you're taking feelings and you're taking thoughts and emotions and you're really turning them into a physical tangible product, like a home that's designed for a person. In that particular scenario, you could build a beautiful home, but if it's exactly opposite of what your client was looking for, and you were the interior designer in terms of design, and they really don't like it, the house is perfectly fine to live in. I mean, there's no damage to any of the neighboring homes or anything like that. So you're not responsible in terms of like a loss or damage, but your advice really missed the mark. So I suppose that's what the question is referring to, is your advice. So if you're a professional and you use your advice to counsel people, then there is the chance that it could happen where your advice misses the mark and you could be on the hook for fixing it, which could be a lot of money. So in that particular case, protect you. Are you there? It kind of cut out a little bit.
Yeah, I know. I'm back now. So I think I got the gist of that. So you can be liable for, or you can be on the hook for advice that you give to somebody if it's not what they were hoping it was going to be.
Right. Yeah. So I use an interior designer as an example. So yeah, like let's just say let's just say you're responsible for putting in an air conditioner, for example, in a home, and air conditioner you recommend, it works, but frankly it was a little too small for the house. It's not really cooling it properly, or the ducting is too small. What that translates into is replacing all of the ducting, so going into the walls, ripping everything out. So these can be pretty sizable claims. And I'm using interior designers as an example, but that's just an easy one for everybody to relate with. But if you're an accountant and you make a mistake on somebody's tax return and it comes back to bite them in terms of penalties or anything like that, that's something that you should be aware of too, right? Accountants, basically any type of professional service. So you've got accountants, doctors will have their own coverage, lawyers will have their own coverage, insurance professionals will have their own coverage. Now, I guess in the tech sector as well, there is that exposure too, because the tech sector is a big one for entrepreneurs and startups. I was at a conference or a little group last night, and actually there's about 150 tech people in the room, and really made me realize what a big industry this is. So so I guess the professional exposure there would be if let's just say a company hires you and you're going to write an app for them, and it ultimately really fails, or it really doesn't do what it needs to do, and now that company is out money. They're out the money for the app, and then they're potentially out business income because the app or the software wasn't ready in time, and they had investors and things like that. So I guess what it also comes down to is looking at the big picture. Like if you make a promise to somebody, like their app or your software is going to do something by a certain date, what happens if it doesn't do that? So
Right.
And again, this isn't really like a fun thing, right? It's not really an exercise in fun. Like, sure, I'd rather be at the beach than thinking about this stuff too, but it's an important step in maintaining a long-term business. Like, to have a viable long-term business, things are going to go wrong. You just want to make sure that the big things that do go wrong, are covered properly, so you can continue.
So would you say being prudent in what you offer as a part of your service is a smart way to go? Like, how do you evaluate what you pitch to a potential client in lieu of the fact that you may be on the hook for something later on?
Yeah, no, for sure. Well, that definitely starts with being aware of that stuff to begin with. So sitting down with a professional, really looking at like what you do, and that professional is going to be able to look at that stuff too, and is going to be able to say, okay, what do you do? And then the professional will be able to look at, just like the way I kind of did with like tech, thinking about lost income or other financial penalties from making a mistake. So the professional is going to be able to assess that stuff from the beginning, and then moving forward, you should be able to operate your business. I mean, it's not supposed to keep you up at night. That's the whole thing. It's supposed to give you kind of the peace of mind to operate your business and know, right? Because you don't want to be up at night thinking, shoot, like what happens if this happens, or 2 weeks
Right.
from now you have a due date and you know you're not going to make it. Well, you've kind of already thought of that stuff, hopefully, and you can just move forward and kind of get the job done. So, anyways, I hope that's an answer to your question there.
Yeah, I hear you. Do you have any stories of when you or someone you know had to protect their advice?
Yeah, there was an interior designer actually that had
Yes, that's where all the examples from interior design come.
so anyways, and they had recommended putting in some heated flooring in some sections of the home, and ultimately it was a bad product. It actually wasn't the right product at all. And then what happened was the floor needed to be so finished home, and you can imagine the cost to then go and take all of the flooring out, and then take all the heated flooring out, and then replace it with the good stuff, and then put the floor back on. I mean, that's not cheap. And so that's the perfect example of just making a pretty simple error, and then it costing thousands of dollars. Not to mention, the family not being able to live there at that time. So there's always these big costs associated with this stuff. So, but if you assess it at the beginning and you have it covered, you should be able to operate and be confident in what you do. Not being, wondering at the end of the day, am I covered for this? Am I not covered for that? So, so you should have somebody in your corner, like just like you have an accountant to do your books. Like you should have like an insurance person. Like you should have an insurance guy that is taking care of your business and is looking after your stuff. So, I hope that helps.
Yeah, okay. And have you always known that there was insurance for protecting advice? Like, was there a moment where it kind of clicked for you that this was something that was available?
Yeah, I think, well, getting into the insurance industry, it is something that you become aware of pretty quick. But I think when it really clicked for me was hearing about very big losses, associated with these like $1 million errors and emissions claims. It's not necessarily at the end of the day too. Let's just say you are just selling water bottles. You don't necessarily have to have you don't necessarily need to cause a bunch of damage for somebody to claim that you did. So even being sued, even if it's, on the fence or maybe a little bit out to left field, those policies include defense costs. So if somebody takes you to court because they say that, they slipped and fell on your steps outside your business, let's just say you're looking at this, a lawyer's going to cost you 20 grand, they're asking for 10. It might just be easier for you to pay the 10 if you don't have the proper coverage, or you could hand it off to your insurance company if they have the proper coverage, and they'll handle your defense, and then of course the damages at the end of the day. So, so at the end of the day, you have to look at it like it's also defense costs. It's just not payouts, in case you cause a big loss. If somebody sues you, there's defense in there too associated with that. So there's that aspect of it too, because oftentimes defense costs are in the hundreds of thousands of dollars for some of these claims.
Sure. And you hear about you can, I guess it goes back to the point you were making before, you can run a really good company and be profitable and then have one of these things come up and it just undoes all of that stuff, I guess.
Yeah. There's an example I read about just the other day, and it's in Canada, and a gentleman was selling water bottles, and so this is exactly this. He was selling water bottles, and one of them had a fly in them, and then anyways, and it was pre-packaged. Like it wasn't like I filled up my own water bottle and I sold it to you. Like he had pre-packaged, like professionally, just water bottles, basically selling water. Anyway, fly in one of them. I don't know how it got in there, but he ended up getting sued for and awarded the guy who bought the water bottle $300,000 in damages because of mental anguish and depression as a result of opening and seeing a fly in his water bottle. And
Right.
whether or not, like, I don't want to speak to the merit of the claim because I don't know that well enough. But at the end of the day, I mean, you ask yourself, how much does somebody need insurance for who's just selling prepackaged water bottles? And you might say, well, what could possibly go wrong? And it's just like, well, $300,000 that the court said that he had to pay out as a result of these damages. So it ended up going to this, it went up to the higher level court. It was dismissed at the end of the day, but these are hundreds of thousands of dollars. In the report I read, it was over $1 million in legal fees.
Wow.
So, for insurance that could cost as little as, maybe $500 a year, to go the distance and pay out, $1 million in legal costs. It's not a bad deal. It really is.
Sorry, I think I've cut out on you again. Hold on.
Yeah, you're back. You're back.
I'm back?
Yeah, I got you. Yeah.
Okay. So as an entrepreneur and a small business owner, when you go into, when you're choosing, well, let's start, how do you choose your company, your insurance company, should you decide to go ahead? How do you choose, and then what questions should you be asking to determine what's the right plan for you, what's the right insurance provider? Take us through that process.
Sure. Well, I would say the first step is, so if you are going to look for, well, let's continue with interior designers. But if you're going to look for an interior designer, you'd probably want one that did for your home. You probably want one that perhaps specializes in residential. And so just like other companies specialize, insurance companies can specialize as well. So there will be specialty insurers for construction. There's going to be specialty insurers for well, I guess every industry will have its own. But so if you're a startup or entrepreneur, you might want to look for a company that has a history or track record of insuring startups and entrepreneurs, because the industry, I think it could do a better job in spending time with entrepreneurs and startups and really going through the risks. So I would say maybe look for a company that specializes in that. And then B, you want one that is going to ask you a lot of questions about your business. Like, you'd like it to be somewhat thorough, right? You want that. You want to be able to connect with them in some way. In terms of how much liability do you have? Okay, here's a price that might not really suffice in terms of what your exposures are. That'll probably suffice for like the landlords and the lenders, but it's not really going to protect you. Well, there's a chance it might not protect you. So I would say, so A, you want to look for specialty insurer if you can. B, you want them to be thorough, and you want them to take the time with you in order to really assess the exposures. B, once that's done, you want to be pretty confident that you understand what they're saying. So there's a lot of acronyms and lingo in the insurance industry. You got D&O, E&O, you've got umbrellas and property and P&C and all these other letters. I don't even know what they mean half the time. No, I'm just kidding. But the thing is, you want them to be very clear and put it into really simple terms. So you want to really end that discussion with the insurance company, understanding your risk and understanding how you're going to be protected. There shouldn't really be a lot of confusion or things you don't understand. And if you have questions and they can't be answered, that's fine, but you should eventually find answers. Like, not everything can be answered right away, and that's okay. But you should have answers eventually. You shouldn't be left really wondering what's going to happen if you have a loss. So a specialty insurer, thoroughness, understanding, and then of course at the end of the day, it should be affordable. So if you have a startup, startups, for the most part, don't have massive bank accounts, or just they're not looking to burn cash. So it should definitely be affordable, and you should be able to look at it and say to yourself, yeah, this seems like a good value in terms of, and if it seems off, like it seems too high, that's okay to go somewhere else and get a second opinion too. So I would say those would be my process in determining if an insurance company was right for me.
Would you suggest entrepreneurs find a mentor or professional as a means of managing risks?
100%. I heard a line a couple of years ago. It stuck with me, and I'm sure everyone's heard this line. It's kind of a cliche now, but if you get your next door neighbor's advice, you'll get your next door neighbor's results. And so what that really means to me is you want somebody who understands insurance a lot better than you. You want somebody who's perhaps been through it. And what you really want is somebody who can offer you a lot of insight and really expand your knowledge on it. So you don't necessarily want to be just getting advice from your neighbors or your friends, although it's probably going to be pretty good advice. It might not be up to date or current. So you definitely want a professional or a mentor who's been there to help you go through the process.
Is it in terms of a mentor, is it good to get somebody who is in your industry? Like where do you go to find somebody like that?
So my mentors are, I do have one or two within the industry, but I would, so can you hear me? Okay.
Sorry, we lost each other again. You were saying, you're just talking about how you found some of the mentors that you have.
So, or is it breaking up again? No, okay. So a couple are in the industry, and how I found it through connection, right? Like this is kind of off the insurance topic, but I'm a big learner in life. Like I read a lot. I read a lot of different things. I mean, there's always a purpose to what I'm reading. This is probably going to make me sound pretty boring, but I'm reading one of the top 5 books on Thomas Jefferson right now, and yeah, it's like it's as exciting as it sounds. But there's a lot of good content. So sure. I guess just living so living life as a learner. And I think people come into your life for a reason. So if you're always willing to learn, there will always be somebody there to learn from. So I would just say being open, and then eventually you're just going to connect with people. And I've never formally asked somebody, would you become my mentor? It's always been just more of like a natural process than anything. But there's a couple different areas in life, but again, I think so. One area in my life is personal development, and growth on the inside. So how I found that mentor was just kind of by chat. It ended up just developing into a mentor-mentee relationship. But I would say it also goes both ways too, because people study a lot. But it goes back to saying, if getting your next door neighbor's results. So ideally, you'd like to have a mentor who is at least a couple steps above you in terms of where you want to be. So if you're working out and you want to get big, you'd hope that the guy training you is a lot bigger than you. Or at least has some significant results. So. Sure. So anyway, so I would say in whatever area you're looking at getting a mentor, you would hope that they have some success beyond that which you have, because otherwise, it might not take you too far.
Gotcha. Right. Well, Mike, I don't have any further questions. Is there anything that I forgot to ask, or anything that you'd like to add or expand on?
Yeah. Well, just one last quick thing. I was just saying this on the last panel, but insurance, like if you take it to a professional, it need to be complicated. It's almost like verbatim what I'm saying last time. It doesn't need to be complicated, and it doesn't need to be necessarily expensive. It should be a fairly easy process. It should be straightforward. And at the end of the day, if all those 4 criteria fit and you understand what you have and what you don't have, it should be it should be a very valuable experience for you and your business. And then it should give you a lot of peace of mind at the end of the night, just to say, yeah, I'm operating my business to the best I can. I've protected it to the best I can. And so I'm just going to go out there and, I'm going to rule the world basically in the industry that I'm operating in. So I would just say it shouldn't be a painful process at all.
All right. Well, thank you so much for spending time with us today and for being a valued guest of Startup Canada Chat Live. It's been great.
Well, I appreciate your time, Matthew. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Okay, take care.
All right. To everyone who joined us today, all the entrepreneurs, startup community leaders, and members, thank you for tuning in. Make sure you join us for the next installment of #Startup Live with Jonathan Moody, COO of Versature, on customer success practice, your secret weapon to obtain renewals and MRR. Sign up at startupcan.ca/events. Thanks very much.